Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. As I said, good evening and welcome to the Titan Talks webinar series for Illinois Wesleyan University, presented by the Office of Alumni Engagement. I am Rosetta Clay, Assistant Vice President of Engagement, and I continue to be encouraged by the number of attendees from the Titan community who participate in these webinars. This platform has enabled us to engage alumni, students, parents, friends, faculty, and staff in a way that we've never been able to do in the past. As I shared before, these talks will be an ongoing engagement opportunity as part of our new normal. A few reminders for our rules of engagement. Please use the chat function to ask your questions, and we will do our very best to answer as many as possible. If you are an alumnus or alumna, a student, be sure to include your name and your grad year. That will be helpful for us to know. And also for all others, if you want to include your affiliation, that would be greatly appreciated as well. If you experience any technical difficulties, try refreshing your browser or leaving the meeting and returning. That usually can be helpful. I'm so excited to introduce our panel of alumni for this evening, who will be discussing the invisibility of Black women in leadership. I'm going to start in alpha order with Dr. Monica Hall. She's a 1990 nursing graduate that went on to earn her PhD in nursing from the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she completed her dissertation on self-care management in African Americans with type 2 diabetes. She is now an assistant professor of nursing here at Illinois Wesleyan. Jazmyne Kellogg is a 2016 graduate with a bachelor's degree in sociology and a minor in psychology. She has been named interim director of the Bruce D. Nesbitt African American Cultural Center at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Ade Olayinka is a 2011 graduate with a bachelor's degree in economics and international studies. She earned her PhD in public policy from Duke University, where she studied the intersection of politics and international development, focusing on coordination among foreign aid donors. In her dissertation, Constrained Coordination, How Politics and Bureaucracy Hinder Donor Coordination, Ade explored how donors' strategic interest and autonomy of aid agencies influence donor coordination in global health. She is a government and public sector consultant at Deloitte Consulting. Alani Sweezy is a 2019 graduate and Rotary Scholar. She is currently studying at the University of Oxford for a Master of Philosophy in Comparative Government, where she is completing research on democracy and far-right populism. And Amanda Toney-Logan, class of 1974, is a history major, a retired judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County, where she served for 15 years. After graduating Illinois Wesleyan, she worked as a manager at Illinois Bell while taking classes at night toward a law degree from DePaul University. She served as a law clerk for the Honorable Illinois Appellate Court Justice R. Eugene Pincham. Eventually, she started her own practice, specializing in employment discrimination and probate law. Amanda successfully campaigned for the position of Circuit Court Judge in 1994 and retained the position 3 times before retiring in 2009. And last, we have Lois Wilkins, a 1975 music major who went on to earn an executive MBA from Northwood University DeVoe School of Management. She has held executive positions at Washington National Insurance and Dow Chemical Company. Lois is founder, CEO, and president of Bright Wilkins Investment Alliance, BWIA, a real estate small business, and BWIA Michigan Incorporated, a nonprofit community outreach company which provides music educational programming, fine arts curriculum development, and scholarships to at-risk students. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that both Lois and Amanda are proud active alumni members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and were initiated into the Iota Zeta chapter here at Illinois Wesleyan. Now, I've made the formal introductions of each of our panelists. I'd like to ask them, without using any of the words that I used in your introduction, and in 25 words or less, to share with our audience what you believe is important for them to know about who you are, what you believe for this discussion, and if you could do so, start with the words "I am." And Monica, we'll start with you.
Okay, that is tough. Well, I'll start off. I am a Black woman of faith, a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a nurse. I try to see the good in everyone. I usually let the little things slide, but when I feel strongly about something, I definitely speak up, which usually surprises the person I'm talking to. They think I'm yelling or mad, and I'm just trying to get my point heard, and I think Black women need to be vocal. It's more than 25 words, sorry.
We're not actually counting, but.
That's
okay.
it.
Jazmyne?
So I am the proud daughter of giants, both familial and unknown. I am a change seeker, a lifelong learner, lover of music, dance, and all Black people.
Great. Ade?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rosetta. I am a daughter, a sister, a Christian. I am pretty short. I am just having a hard time in the last 3 weeks. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be a graduate of Wesleyan.
Thank you. Alani?
I am a Black woman who believes in the utility of Black feminist thought and the importance of centering ethics in all of my decisions. And I am a lifelong student.
So I see, Amanda, that you've joined us. Sorry. We have just started.
I'm on my phone. I'm not on my computer.
Okay. We've just started the introductions, the one where you introduce yourself in 25 words or less, starting with I am, and not using the words that I used in the formal introduction.
Okay. I'll start with I'm honest and trustworthy. I'm a hard worker and I work well with others. I'm willing to go it alone if necessary. I am a reader. I am a learner. I am a music lover. And I'm also one of those women who just want to have fun. And finally, I believe if we all take an honest assessment of ourselves and our attitudes and check ourselves, we will all be better with dealing with each other.
Thank you for that. Lois?
Okay. Well, I'm Lois Wilkins. I am a visionary. I believe as a Black woman, I need to create the space I want to be in. I'm a mother of 4 graduates, and I look forward to this panel discussion today.
Well, thank you all again for sharing that with us. I think it's important for people to know more than just your bio and who you are, especially in this particular discussion. So now in setting the framework for our discussion, I want us to consider a few thoughts. When our society challenges sexism, it typically centers around white women's experience, and when race is on the table, the discussion is frequently centered around Black men. Black women have multiple subordinate identities within broader systems of oppression effectively that renders them in this concept that we're talking about here today, invisibility. And among Black women and girls, there is an intersection of sexism and racism as we sometimes can experience. And that intersectionality of discrimination can perpetuate the racial and gender wealth gaps that limits Black women's access to educational opportunities, as well as impeding their career advancement. And so I'd also like to share just a few statistics that I researched for the topic from catalyst.org and also womenintheworkplace.com. On these sites, it talks about how women of color make up 14% of the population. They hold less than 11% of managerial roles, less than 8% of senior management roles, and less than 4% of executive leadership roles in U.S. Fortune 500 companies. Now, notice I said women of color. That does not equate to what Black women is in that percentage. So I want us to keep that in mind in our discussion as well. Catalyst is a global nonprofit working group that helps CEOs and other leading companies to build workplaces that work for women. They founded in 1962, and they help organizations to accelerate progress for women. A few more statistics, and then we'll get to the discussion. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the percentage of Black women who are full-time minimum wage workers is higher than that of any other racial group. In 2019, Black women working full-time earned 62 cents for every dollar white non-Hispanic men earned. That means that it takes the typical Black woman 19 months to be paid the average of what a white man takes home in 12 months. In addition to being overrepresented at the low paying end of the spectrum, Black women are underrepresented at the top, as I just shared with those statistics. And they make up just 1% of high paying engineering workforce and 3% of computing jobs. These, unfortunately, are the fields where the gender pay gap is the smallest, and among Black women who do break into these careers, discriminatory pay and promotion practices also tend to drive them out. So let's get into our topic. In discussing the invisibility of Black women, what I realized in our pre-discussion of this is that not all of us have the same experience for every situation as it relates to invisibility. Some said, yes, I experienced it. Some said no, because I speak up. And so I'd like to ask each of you to speak on your personal experience and how you've managed to increase your own invisibility. And I'll start with Lois, because you were one of the ones who said, I didn't experience it because I spoke up about it. So can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, and you know, when we actually spoke about this, I actually had not looked at the specific questions that you were asking us, so I have to ask your forgiveness on that. However, I did have an opportunity to manage a group of analysts in when I was at in my corporate world, and I managed to increase my visibility when I entered the company because I entered in as an analyst, and I guess I thought it was helpful for me to let people know that I'm a visionary, and I think outside the box, and I find a way out of no way. And when I told them that, I said, I don't think you have a lot of people in the company that are going to reach the percentage point of wanting to look for ways out of work. So that's how I learned how to speak up, because I knew I was not going to be amongst the procedure or pragmatic folks who saw things in an individual way. So.
Anyone else that would like to share on the topic?
Yes, I have a couple of stories. As I said, I am a nurse, so I'm in a predominantly female profession, dealing with a predominantly male physician. And I, became an assistant manager early in my career. Very few Black women at the hospital had a management position. As a matter of fact, there were two, and the other one was my sister. And as far as invisibility goes, I just want to share this story. Just recently, when I was on a conference call with a colleague with a company, this person was, trying to teach us something about how to integrate for our online learning. And as this man is talking to my colleague and I, and he kept on saying, Miss Monica, Miss Monica. And then when he would refer to my colleague, he called her Dr. So-and-so. And as you can see in our little boxes, it has everyone's name. So I know that he saw my name. There was a point in which he had to read something from one of our screenshots that said Dr. So-and-so and Dr. Hall. He was able to say that. And then right afterwards, he went back and Miss Monica and Miss Monica and Dr. So-and-so. And I had let it slide. because like I said, I tend to let the little things go. But obviously it did bother me. And we do have another meeting with him come next week. And believe me, if he continues to address me as Miss Monica, as he addresses my coworker as Dr. So-and-so, I will speak up. And so that's just one case, and I'll let someone else talk.
Okay.
I would love to jump in here as well. Yeah, I mean, I've been experiencing invisibility for me personally has sometimes been I don't even notice it sometimes until I look back over time and realize, I mean, because I think as Black women who are, I assume, often in very white spaces, you learn to be a chameleon, right? You learn to, okay, in this space, or to succeed, I might need to act like this or do this or be this, right? That has been my experience. Let me not speak for everyone, but in my experience, I've learned to be a chameleon, and I've learned to do it from a young age, right? So often it's been like looking back over my life, I see these moments in time. And a more recent example is, the search for transparency at my company when, with regards to hiring, promotions, firings, all kinds of things. There's this big movement to really understand what those disparities are. And somebody started a petition, which I think is a great idea, petition our leadership to find out more. But there's a petition for race and no gender included. And then I've had conversations with women who want to petition for gender with no race included. And these things don't make sense to me, right? Because I know that as a Black woman, I'll probably make less than my male colleagues who are Black. And as a Black woman, I make less than my white colleagues who are women. So things like that just seem to, in a nice way maybe, in the most innocent reading of it possible, is just slip people's minds about, even collecting statistics so that we can know what's happening, right? So that's one thing I'd say. And ways that I've managed to increase my my visibility. I haven't always been a speaker-upper. I haven't always been someone who's brave enough to do it, who even notices, like I just said, right? Who even notices it's happening to me. But I've been very blessed in many situations to have people who saw it for me and were able to either help me speak up for myself or advocate on my behalf. And those people have often been Black mentors, but not always.
Right.
Well-intentioned or seasoned or well, observant people of other genders and races. So finding friends, finding allies, finding champions by my definition, not by their definition of what they are to me, is something that has helped me a lot.
Thank you. Alani, I'd like to hear from you on this because you are in school in a whole nother country at this point. And sometimes Americans are perceived differently. And so how do you navigate this space in another country? You're on mute.
Yeah, I would say that often Black women are invisible, even in Oxford, especially because when people think of Americans, they often think of white people. I've had people ask me where I'm really from because I am Black and American. But also, I would say that I most often experience invisible professors. For example,
Alani, I have to interrupt you. Your connection is really bad.
Are Black, and none of the readings that we have. Okay, 1 second.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Amanda, did you want to jump in on this, or should I move on to the next question?
I could jump in, but it's just a little story that, I had about getting into trouble because I have always spoken up. My mother used to tell me all the time that, Amanda, all they can do is say no. But anyway, I worked at a large company when I first got out of IWU, and I was hired as a management trainee, which meant that I would get experience, on being a manager in various departments in the company. And so in one department that I went I was approached by my boss. You know, we had different levels, first level, second level, third level, fourth level, you know, managers. Well, anyway, I was approached by my fourth level manager, and he wanted to know if I would consider ever dating a white man. And again, I replied, if you put a bag over my head. And I was just kidding, you know, and his reaction, when I saw his face, I said to myself, I know I'm not going anywhere in this company ever. And that was confirmed by another friend in another department who told me that his division boss was trying to get me into his department and that my boss would not let me go. So that meant that I would, you know, be in his department until he decided to let me go. So I'm saying that to say sometimes we can speak up and get into trouble for speaking up. And if we do, we just have to think of ways to get around it, because there was nothing that I could really do except maybe date him to get out of that particular department. So it's just that I just wanted to just say that sometimes speaking up will get us into trouble, and we have to be prepared for the consequences. And as a Black woman, I know we speak up a lot, and I've been told that my mouth is too big, but it's just, that's how it is.
Yeah, I think what I've learned over the years is you have to pick your battles or choose the battles that are the most important, and some of them just aren't. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. Using Kimberly Williams Cresshaw's definition of intersectionality, understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities, gender, race, class, sexuality, ability, etc., this might combine to create new unique modes of discrimination. Intersectionality identifies injustice felt by people due to a combination of factors. Do you feel you are able to be your authentic self in the workplace because of this intersectionality as a Black woman? And Jazmyne, I'll start with you.
So I would say it depends on the spaces that I'm in. And so as I shared, I work in higher education, and within the Black Cultural Center that I lead, I feel that I'm able to be authentically myself because I have a position of power within that space where I can set the agenda of what inclusivity looks like for us and demonstrate for the students what my authentic self is, right? However, that's a double-edged sword. I'm also in higher education, right? So when I'm in other spaces, I think the intersectionality piece for me is that, one, I'm a young professional, and then two, classism plays a huge role in the ways that I'm able to navigate higher education. So oftentimes what I found is that folks who have a PhD, folks who are white, folks who are older, tend to be looked at as like the leaders or the legitimate thought partners or collaborators on projects compared to myself, right? And so oftentimes I walk into the room and folks are like, oh, like, what's your major? And I'm like, well, I majored in, right? To like establish, even when I'm wearing a name tag that says that I work on campus, right? So I think like being my most authentic self, it depends on the space that I'm in and the ways that I'm able to carry it out. I think to Amanda's point around like being able to speak up or even being your most authentic self, or right now we're talking about the movement for Black lives and we're talking about defunding systems of oppression like the police, right? Like while that may be my like line of thought or ideology or where I fall within the movement, the way that I articulate that in certain spaces is different, right? And if I want to be my most authentic self, I'm like, this is what it is. This is what we need to do. But figuring out the language in which folks can like understand that and like kind of meeting them where they're at. And I also recognize, like for myself at least, that can be exhausting. So.
Sure. Lois, any thoughts on this intersectionality and how you can be your authentic self?
Well, you know, Amanda and I come from the generation where I don't think we had a choice. It was, we had mentors and teachers who knew that our class was like we had 80 to 90 students at Illinois Wesleyan of African-American descent at that time. The largest, that you don't have that many. And I think I mentioned that the other day. But back then people were expecting to hear a different way of looking, at comments in the class. So I guess I learned early that I didn't have a choice. I needed to be able to speak up, and I was the only African American in the orchestra at that time. 4 years in a music school where you're one of 4 students during the whole 4 years you're there, you have a lot of opportunities to you either sit back and pretend like nobody's looking at you, or you be your authentic self.
I'd like to jump in on that. I think that being authentic, that was the only way that we could be. I didn't know any other way to be. And I just found that sometimes when you are your authentic self, particularly around white people, you end up explaining things a lot. You explain, what this means, why you say this. And for me, that was just a way of educating them as to who or what I was. But I could be nothing else. That's the only thing I could be, was authentic. I had nothing else to be. That was me.
Right. And as my grandmother used to say, being you is enough.
Right.
So,
do you.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so our next question, what would you share with other Black women of all generations about the importance of their presence in every space in which they exist, at work, conferences, committees, school boards, etc.? How important is it for them to show up and make themselves visible? And I'll start with you, Monica.
Thank you. I would say, please speak up and get involved. I am on my hometown's high school board, and I will go on and say I received the most votes out of anybody who was running. I went out there, I campaigned, and you need to make sure that your voice is heard, because it's important, and you need to understand that even if you do not think anyone is looking at you or listening to you, people are. And there are so many young Black students who listen to me, who notice me, and whether it's the school board. I have three kids who are college age. I was always at sporting events. I made sure I was there, I was positive, I was involved. And in the classroom, I tried to make sure that the Black students know that I am there. And on campus, when I was first hired, I was the only Black faculty at Wesleyan, because the one had just left. So I was the only Black faculty there. And the first day on campus, just walking around, when I would see a Black student, I was just like, oh my goodness, hi. It was just so nice to see a Black student. And I made sure that I let those students know, you do not need to be a nursing major to come to my office, and to close the door and to just speak. Because at Wesleyan, I love my job. I will say that. I am happy. I think I'm blessed that I'm in the nursing department. And I have had many non-nursing students come to my office and just talk. And so I think I might have lost track of what the question was, but just make sure that you speak up and you are present.
Alani, are you back? Can we hear you now?
I think so. I switched over to my phone.
Okay.
But to the question at hand, I do think that it is important to speak up. And I think that studying philosophy at Illinois Wesleyan has taught me the importance of knowledge and knowledge justification, And so I think that if we as Black women don't show up and speak for ourselves, our stories and our issues are in a way often overlooked. And when our stories are told, if they're told by other people, they're often diminished.
It's an excellent point. Ade, did you want to add to that?
Sure, I'll jump in, and I just want to echo what Monica said, because as somebody who spent most of my life in school until very recently, nobody on my committee was Black. Nobody on my undergrad committee was Black. Nobody on my master's committee was Black. Nobody on my PhD committee was Black. I rarely took a class, if ever, I have to think about that one, with a Black faculty member. I've rarely had a Black manager, but I relied on professors like Monica to be there. And sometimes it's hard because the burden really is on you, right? Like I have junior practitioners at my firm who come to me and we just talk about their experiences. When I was this more senior PhD student, I had more junior PhD students just coming to talk. The burden is more on you to both do your job and have this other important thing that you care about, but does take time. But it really matters, speaking as somebody who's been like, the drain on the Black faculty member or the drain on the Black manager, just to share my experiences and get guidance. It's invaluable. And I wouldn't be where I am without being able, seeing people in that position, people who finished their PhD, people who have gotten promoted, people, whatever, without knowing it's possible. But I wouldn't be happy in my job or in my PhD if I hadn't had other people ahead of me to look at and just be like, okay, I can do it. Okay, they're fine-ish, for the most part. They seem to be doing okay. It's a world of comfort. It's a world of support. But know that being on the other side of that, while it's really fulfilling, it's work. It's work. It can be tiring work.
Yes, and that's actually one of the comments and or questions from J.A. Baker, saying that would love to hear your thoughts on sharing our stories, but also the fact that re-traumatization and emotional labor are real. At this point, I'm oversharing. I'm over having to share my experience in order to educate. And I think, Amanda, you alluded to having to educate others in being your authentic self or being honest about that. Can you speak a little bit to that and answer J.A. Becker's question of sharing the re-traumatization and the emotional labor that
Yes, it can. She's saying that it's tiring. It can be tiring and it can get on your nerves. But again, you talk about us putting ourselves out there and participating and wanting to educate. You tell them, even if you get tired of doing it, I think that's a burden on us. When you talk about intersectionality or whatever, that's a burden on us. It really is. But I think, how else are we going to get the point across if we don't talk to them and act like we want to share or be a part of this world or a part of this community? I don't know where they will learn it. They'll just go back and say, well, I don't have any Black friends. I don't know this. I don't know that. Well, when you're around me and you're white, you don't have that excuse because I've talked to you about it. And the excuse is yours, not mine. So I just feel it's another, I won't call it a burden, but it's just another way to educate. And you can get tired, but I think just like everything else, we have to do it. If we're going to live in this life, we have to let people know who we are or why we're the way we are. And if they ask me 1,000 times, I'll tell them 1,000 times. I might be a little, whatever about it, telling them, but I will tell them. I just think it's my duty to do so.
I agree with you on that, Lois. I often say that it can be tiring and exhausting, but I think it is important for us to have these kinds of conversations to help create a space where we aren't afraid to have those discussions, because I think that's why we live in such a difficult time, is that people don't want to have these conversations about racism or about sexism or whatever the ism is at the moment. And if we are open to having these honest conversations without emotion and defensiveness as a part of it, or offensiveness as a part of it, and just really are willing to share and listen, I think that can help us get to a better space. And so I think conversations like this that allow us to have this dialogue and also allow others to ask the questions without feeling as though it is a burden, that we can help some of this. But I do also think that the onus, I see you, Lois, I think also that the onus can't just be on us, but it is incumbent upon others to educate themselves, right? And there's this thing called the internet, and you can Google it, you can even talk to your phone and just ask a question. And I think that's something that others need to start doing, to educate themselves and then say, hey, I looked into this, what do you think about this? Or what are your feelings on it? And then that's a dialogue, and it's not just a question of, you know, asking without having the information to back that up. Lois, you wanted to join in on this?
Yeah,
one?
I wanted to give this past couple of weeks, I've had a lot of Caucasian acquaintances and friends who have asked me about what I felt about first one was a kind of a humorous interaction. It was asking about how did I feel about the riots. And I said, well, no, you mean protests. And then we chuckled at that, because I said, what that told me is where you're getting your information from. So the other one that I had was, what should I do? You know, I know you, I know your family. It would hurt me if the police, for example, you know, targeted one of your children. That is an issue. And I said, well, what you can do, number one, you know my kids. So therefore, what would you do if I called you and said, this is what happened? What would you do? I said, the first two things I try to encourage people to do is, one is go home and ask your family members, your younger family members, what they think about it. Because your age group and younger are tending to really understand that what we were taught is not necessarily lining up with what is happening. If you get stopped by the police, then cooperate and this will happen. Well, we're seeing evidences that that's not always the case. So that younger generation is not tolerating that. My other thing is, what's your impression of the fact that this friendly protest or cooperative and friendly protest, as they said, this is unusual. It's gone on very long. So there must be something going on that's going to cause an impactful change. What are you going to do about it?
Right. Jazmyne?
I think to J.A. Becker's point about re-traumatization and emotional labor, I think that is also really important to think about self-care, and not in like the cute frilly ways, like, you know, I did this one thing this one time, but self-care over time. Because I do think that like we do take on a lot of emotional labor, sometimes physical labor, right? Of like doing movement work, of sharing our stories. And so having the opportunity to just be like, today is not the day. Like, I'm not going to share today. Like, that can be your form of self-care. So I would just offer that and like lift that up as like also a valid solution. I think that, at least for me personally, a part of the movement for Black lives is realizing that Black joy is a part of our resistance. And if your joy comes in forms of self-care, then that's important to take that time to do so. I would also say, like, to the original question, that sometimes, like, if you are a person who is maybe more nervous to speak up, or like your heart starts beating really fast because you're like, I got all these things to say, but I don't know how to like get it out in like this moment, to not be too hard on yourself, to like literally give yourself grace, and practice like, what would you tell your friend if they were telling you the story about how you're, like the way that you're talking to yourself. And so give yourself grace and realize like there's always going to be a time like when you can speak up, and that really this work should be shared, right? There should be some sort of shared accountability to where if I don't speak up today, that I know Monica got my back, that Ade got my back, that Alani, Lois, Amanda, right, Rosetta. And so I just want to like offer that there, like self-care is important, y'all.
Absolutely. A couple of more comments. Ellie Jones, I greatly appreciate that honest conversations are taking place. I agree. I do believe that as a white person, it is my responsibility to learn, to listen, and to educate myself. It is my responsibility to learn how to be an ally. Ellie is class of 91. Dave Darling, thank you all, such wonderful panelists who I've had the pleasure to know. Good to learn from each of them. I admire them and many more Titans I've had the privilege to know. David Wilkins says, great point to make. Always ask what you are willing to do about it. Stop passing the buck. And I think that right there, that accountability, and Lois is smiling, that's her husband. That accountability is important, right? It's not just for us, but it's for everyone. Be accountable for yourself and your knowledge base and your information and what you are bringing to this whole, what I believe is, again, a movement, a tipping point. Because what I've noticed is many of the people in the streets aren't just brown and black. It is many people that are tired, that are exhausted. So it's not just us. And I think that is the important part. I want to get to that conversation about the activism and the protest, because historically, activism, protests, and rallies have been necessary for progress and change. And how do you view this historical activism as different from other times in our history? I know Amanda and Lois, you can speak to this from your time here on campus, and can you compare it to the times that you were here as students and what you're seeing now? Amanda?
Well, I think that there's more involvement of everyone, more involvement by the younger generation than it was during our generation up here in the Midwest. I think now all of the young ones are getting involved, and they're not concerned or worried about having a leader, so to say. They're all doing what they think is necessary, and they're all contributing to it, and they're not waiting for anyone to tell them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I think that is good, because it's making them participate more in their lives. They're not waiting for anyone. And I said to myself the other day, I think Black Lives Matter is a good movement, and it doesn't have any particular leader, because back during my day, everybody was getting killed, shot, or something was happening to the leaders, or they were being worn out because every time something happened, somebody would stick a microphone up in their face or ask them why, or this, that, and what have you. It's like they couldn't, do anything without everyone questioning them as to why they did it. But even though it's so everybody's involved in it, it seems like it's just one movement, because everybody is speaking on the same, level. And it's just like it's more power and more spirit behind everything now than it was back in the 1970s. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. And I saw that and noticed that too, that there are so many people that are leading this effort. And I think that is why this feels different and is a little different. And I just want to say, David Wilkins is correcting me. He's the junior, not the senior. Okay. But it's still a great point to make. So Lois, you are an activist. So I want you to tell us about your story on Sandra Bland and how you started a movement there.
Yeah, I one day after I saw what had happened with Sandra Bland,
Can you inform everyone about Sandra Bland who may not be familiar?
Okay, so Sandra Bland is one of the young women, maybe about 4 years ago, that was stopped by the police, and she was on her way to Texas, where she lived and went to school, and she was getting ready to start her job. A policeman stopped her and asked her, was just doing confrontation with her. Well, the long story short is that he asked her to get out of the car. She asked why was she asking her to get out of the car, and one thing led to the other, and he took her in, and she, over the weekend period of time that she was there, she quote unquote committed suicide by hanging herself. I thought that was a little crazy. Number one, I had been following Sandra Bland because she was presenting herself to young African-American boys about encountering the police and what she should say. So she was speaking up. Her voice was very vital, similar to what Amanda was saying about leaders who speak up. Sometimes they are the ones that get taken out. So I went on moveon.org and signed up a petition. I started the petition, and they contacted me and asked me, would I insert this line, and then we're going to push this petition out. Well, it was a very simple add-on, and I had no problem. I thought, okay. So I put the petition, and I thought, oh, maybe a couple of other people might see that they thought this was a little bit unusual too. I went and took a nap. When I got up, my husband came in and he said, there is a newscaster outside our front door wanting to talk to you. And I said, for what? They said, well, they got the cameras and everything. So I went outside, and they said, I don't know, do you realize that you have over 500,000 signatures on your petition you started? I was like, no, I didn't. So my point is that speaking up, sometimes I wasn't looking for the opportunity to do that. I just honestly believed that that was an injustice that was done. Well, to fast forward, I ended up taking those petitions to the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And when I got there, Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and NPR, all these other reporters were standing there waiting to understand, why I felt this was an important gesture to make. So as I still follow and I still report on updates on what's going on with Sandra Bland, her family, I mean, not with Sandra Bland herself, but obviously her family and the support. Right. So I do think it's an important thing to do. We need to be there.
Right, at our own level, whatever that activism may be.
Right, say her name.
And her name. Barb White says, an important study was just released regarding the impact of states that have enacted restrictions on asking a job applicant their salary history. Do you see this as progress on any level? And it actually takes us back to our conversation about the pay gap and what organizations can do at leveling the field as it relates to equity and pay. Ade, I know you spoke a little bit about this. Do you want to start?
Oh man, I was hoping you wouldn't call me, because as a person who studied policy and was also as a person who does research, I always am so hesitant to speak on issues that I don't know a ton about, or policies that I don't know a ton about. So I don't know this exact policy. I will say that I think transparency is a double-edged sword, and that's probably what this policy is meant to address. So I can only speak to the fact that within my firm, nobody knows how much anybody makes, and nobody knows who's getting fired and who's getting hired and who's getting promoted. And in some ways, I see that as a good thing, because it allows us to advocate for ourselves, for what we believe, what we're worth, and not worry about, I don't know, all the attachments that come with people knowing exactly what our salary and what the company values us as, or whatever. But for the most part, I think that transparency, at least where we are right now, we know so little. We know we have abstract notions and vague data from other studies, right, that tell us what's happening. But I can't go to my firm with an informed piece of information and say, hey, this is
this is what I owe, you owe me based on what, you know, I can see what's happening, what else is happening, based on the landscape. So I guess I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, and that tends to be my training. But I do think there's a double-edged sword to transparency. And I'll just stop there. I'll stop.
Okay.
I just want to give an example. When I first entered the corporate world, and I told you that we had different levels of management, well, you knew what their range of salaries were. You know, you knew that because the company published it, or you knew what it was. So you knew if you got promoted to the second level, you knew what the range of pay was. And you knew that if you worked so many years and did this was your levels that you would get, you know, raises according to whatever your performance. So it was no question about how much people made. You knew how much they made. And the women made just as much as the men as you thought we did, but it depends on how, you know, who was writing off or signing off on your raises, etc. Because everybody got, you know, raises. And we knew that if we got out, we went from one level to the next, you know, what our salaries would be. And I thought it was good. You know, I mean, you couldn't squawk because you knew that I'm supposed to, even if it was a guy, if I'm in this pay grade, I'm supposed to be making the same money he is or she is. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Jazmyne, I want you to jump in, and then Monica, I'll come to you because I know you both have stories. Jazmyne, because you work at a state institution, you have the luxury of seeing a book with everyone's salary. And I used to work at a state institution, and it was the same way. And so I know how I felt when I would read that book. So you tell us about your experience in reading salary.
Yeah, so we do have a book that, like, you know, publishes everyone's salary, which I personally have found helpful, but also like frustrating in certain moments to be like, this is not my salary, sis, and this is, you know, what somebody else doing the same work is getting. And so, but that does help me be able to like advocate for myself. And so throughout the year, I'll keep like tabs on like, I did this and I did that. And so like when it comes to like a performance review, I can talk to my supervisor and be like, this is why I believe I should get a raise. This is what I've seen throughout our institution. And even for myself, we got a new associate vice chancellor who oversees all of our cultural centers. And as she came on board, that's one of the things I was able to talk about. And I was able to like, you know, add a little cute link with the data to show like, we are the lowest paid, right? Like assistant directors within cultural centers are the lowest paid within the Division of Student Affairs at Illinois, right? But then the amount of work, when you compare that to other job descriptions across campus, doing the same thing, maybe in academic departments, it's a different story. And so for me, I think it's super important to be transparent. I read, it was on social media the other day that like, the act of not being transparent is a tool that's been used as a form of oppression, so that folks don't know, so that people can tell you, you know, this is what you should be getting paid for your work. So I think that it's helpful. I found it helpful in my personal life. And even, you know, as I transitioned as the interim director, I had colleagues who had been interim directors of their centers, and we had open conversations, and they were like, girl, go for your coins, right? Secure the bag, because that's important, right? And so had I not had those conversations, I would have had to like, I wouldn't have known maybe what was to come.
So Monica and Alani, I am coming to you, I promise. My laptop is up, so I couldn't see your hand, so I apologize. Monica and then Alani, and you can talk about all things, Alani.
Okay, I just want to say I have also worked for several different places. One, I know that everyone knew the salaries, and others like at Wesleyan, you don't. I just want to say that Black women, I think, tend to lowball their value. And I will tell you what, white men will think, hey, I am worth, boom, up here. If you ever have a job in which you can go and negotiate your salary, you ask for the moon, okay? Let them bring you down. Do not say, oh, well, what if they don't want to pay me that? What if they don't offer me the job? No, I guarantee you, that if a white man is going for that same job, he is not thinking, oh, what if they don't hire me? Should I not ask for this? We need to learn to don't be afraid and to value what we can bring to institutions or to the job, and make sure that they know that, and we set a higher dollar value for that. Okay.
Thank you for that. Alani?
I don't think my hand was with regards to the salary question, simply because I haven't had a salary job yet.
No, I just wanted to get you into the conversation because you hadn't been because of your, because I couldn't see your hand on that. So speak on whatever it is that you want.
I think I actually raised my hand for the question about emotional labor, simply because I do think that there is a lot of emotional labor that is taxing when you speak out about these issues. But as somebody who is currently studying politics at a predominantly white institution, I think that Black voices are often overlooked, especially when we speak about American politics. So I often find myself correcting other students about what we should be saying about America and how people vote and what people do, especially when we look at demographic breakdowns, especially with this being an election year. So yeah, I do think that it's necessary that we do it, but also we have to find allies to basically decompress and engage in self-care.
Yes. Jewel Walton says, truth on the undervaluing thing. My white male boss, in parenthesis, a great ally, schooled me on that. President Georgia Nugent says, there's a great book on this, Women Don't Ask. Ellie Jones says, great advice, Dr. Hall. And Day, you have one other point that you'd like to share with us on this, and then we'll move on to the next.
I just wanted to say there's a really interesting movement happening on, like, worldwide, but I'm particularly watching one. I'm really into skincare. I love makeup, despite my appearance today. There's really interesting one happening in the beauty industry and kind of in the sales industry, the commercial goods industry, largely, broadly speaking, where people are just demanding to know what the breakdown of who works there. And lots of brands who said, we stand with Black lives, this is great, yes. These brands were doing absolutely nothing, right? And people demanded to know what was happening inside. And by simply asking and demanding that brands release their numbers, brands also had to come up with often plans for how they were going to do better. Before it was just, black square on Instagram or a statement on Twitter, move along. But people said, no, what are you actually doing? And so transparency also has so maybe the intended, maybe unintended consequence sometimes of forcing people to own up and really look in the mirror and say, like, what are we doing? We can, words are fine, but action is what counts. And
I want to read a message that is actually to Dr. Monica Hall, and it is her colleague that she shared the story about. She didn't share her name, but she has said it's okay to share her name. So it's Dr. Noel Kerr, and she says, Dr. Hall, I appreciate the way you so eloquently told the story of how the educational company representative referred to you during our recent conference call versus how he referred to me. I thought that was strange and also felt uncomfortable at the time. I want to take the opportunity to publicly apologize to you for, one, not following my discomfort to a deeper level of awareness and empathy for how you might be feeling during that call, and two, for addressing you as Monica, as a close colleague during that call, and not taking the opportunity to address you as Dr. Hall, and doing that, taking the opportunity to act as a role model. I value you and your voice, Dr. Noel Kerr. And so I too appreciate you saying that publicly, Dr. Kerr, but this is where we can talk about how to be an ally, right? And what that means in those spaces, because it's great for us to call it out as the person that is being as this new word of microaggression, or things of this nature that makes us uncomfortable or makes us feel as though we have to prove ourselves. But we have colleagues in the room too who should, if they feel comfortable, being an ally. So how do we speak to that, and how do we help them feel comfortable being an ally in those kinds of spaces? Anyone can jump in on that. I don't see a hand. I'm looking at you now, Alani.
Just speak up, basically, you know, address Dr. Hall. I think what this gentleman was saying is that, and then ask the question, but just to you know, make it so that you feel that you have an ally in the room. I think we all need to have that advocate.
Okay. And so Dr. Kerr says, I don't think it's about feeling comfortable and being an ally. It's about doing it and being an ally.
That's true.
So
that is true.
Point. Thank you for that. David Wilkins says, as Black women, do you fear what will happen if you do speak out? Are there legal actions that can be taken if you get fired based on speaking out? And maybe we'll turn to Amanda on this one.
There are legal actions. There are legal actions that you can take, but always be prepared for the repercussions, because there will be repercussions. I used to tell the younger lawyers that what you need to do is save your money, so you can go somewhere else when there's a need to go somewhere else. Okay, don't sit there and moan and bemoan and complain. Just get the heck out of there. But on the legal side, you can file complaints within the company. You can first go to the Human Resources Department, and then you can file what we call an EEOC claim. That may be in the court forever. You'll be surprised at what you have to prove. I used to advise my clients, and this is even before, because you're not even thinking about anything like that happening until it actually happens. But it would be good whenever you're in jobs, I don't care what job it is, for you to take notes about what happens every day, what so-and-so said to you, or maybe that particular day he called you or she called you out of your name. Make a note of it, because those are notes that can be used when you go to file complaints about someone and what happened, because a lot of times you won't be believed. It will be your word against their word. But if you have something to back up, like this happened at 4:45 on January 1st, this is what so-and-so said to me, that other person will be surprised, because, you know, they'll be so taken aback that they can't lie. They'll be surprised that you kept notes on the conversation. But again, EEOC complaints are hard. They are hard to go anywhere, because again, it's your word against their word, or I didn't understand that's what it meant to somebody when I said it, or that I'm sorry, and if you do succeed in one of those EEOC complaints, the amounts that you can receive are limited. You don't get some outrageous amount in a payout for, you know, what your injustice was. So there are avenues to take, but the thing is, do you want to spend your time taking those avenues? You know, what do you want to do? Do you want to go someplace else? Because those grudges, when you hold, I won't call them grudges, but when you have something that you feel that can eat you up on the inside, and it can keep you from moving on to another place. And I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm just saying just be prepared to fight the fight, because they are not easy fights.
Right. I'm going to read a couple more comments, and then I want to kind of shift to what we can talk about or speak to as it relates to progress here on Wesleyan's campus or within our own organizations, of how we can help to progress this conversation and or any other types of action. Samantha Robinson Sherrod of class of 2001 says, you have to have the courage to be an ally. It simply takes courage. I'm sorry, the list keeps moving up. Rachel Paturi says, I believe that it's incumbent upon non-Black people of color to stand with our Black colleagues. because this myth that pits different groups against one another is another racist tactic that society has thrust upon us that is totally false. So let's move and try to get to, we're a little bit past 7, so let's try to talk about some things that we can do to help progress this conversation or help others in their progression to move past some of these issues and talking about them, and other actions that organizations can take to help in these conversations. Lois, did you want to start on this?
Well, one thing is, I guess I believe it is very important that we develop the confidence in ourselves as Black women to just consider ourselves the spokesman. We've got to speak up. It isn't a choice. Even if you think you're going to lose your job, as Amanda was saying, keep copious notes on the encounters that you have that are problematic. But I want to just say that on campus, Illinois Wesleyan's campus has changed over the years. And when we were in school, we had a protest. It was silent. We all came in our Black shirts and bandanas, and we had dinner and we spoke not one word.
What were you all protesting at the time?
I think it had something to do with the Vietnam War. I don't remember. Amanda, do you remember?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. I just remember the event, and I remember how we responded to that in that way. In our companies, I guess, I'm not in a company, I'm a community involved person. So it's a little different for me because I volunteer a lot and you really can't fire me. So it's a little bit different, but it's still important to be at that table. I guess that's my point. You have to find those opportunities to be at the table and speak up, because consider yourself the voice for the one who is intimidated by not speaking up. I guess that's my point on that.
Anyone else as it relates to progressing the conversation, solutions on how we can improve it, in particular here on the IWU campus?
I'll jump in here. And this is maybe a more global comment than specific, but I think it's true of IWU as well. That if you can't even recognize when a microaggression or a larger scale attack on someone is happening, then you're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to be an ally. You're not going to be able to teach about it. This is something I'm learning about with regards to, being a better ally to my friends who are LGBTQ, particularly learning about trans issues. If I don't even recognize the attacks on a queer person or on a trans person, then I can't speak up, right? If I don't understand when somebody says, "Wow, you're so articulate," or "You speak so well," or did your hair grow long overnight? That is a microaggression. If you don't understand them, then you can't help me, right? So not to necessarily harp on the education piece, but it's something that it's being illuminated for me, that it's really important to just know what's going on. And after that, you can speak up when you see something. You can't be uncomfortable on the phone call with Dr. Hall if you don't know what's happening, right? If you don't even recognize it. So that's something that I think is important. And the last thing I would say is there are many ways to be an ally, but you're not going to be an ally to everybody, right? You might have 2 Black friends, and one might think you're an ally, and the other might think you're not. You don't get to term yourself the ally. You can do all the actions. You should still do everything that you think is right, because being an ally is about doing what you think is right. But forcing those conversations, I think panels like this are a great public forum to inform yourself. We should continue to do things like this. They should continue to, assign summer books that make people really critically think about situations that they haven't been a part of, that they haven't experienced. Really highlighting intersectionality and whether that's about, women or queer issues, or frankly, as I haven't said this yet, but I'm Nigerian American, I'm first generation, and I've had to learn a lot. I've had to unlearn a lot of problematic things that I've learned, right? So just continue to have conversations and know, and maybe teaching and finding resources to help people understand. I don't know if I'm going to term this exactly right, but I'll try to say what's on my heart, which is that, some of these conversations have to happen in relationship, and some of them can happen like this, right? But you probably shouldn't just, this is a personal opinion, go up to random Black people or random queer people and be like, tell me about your experience with, sex. Everything happens in an appropriate forum, and that's not to say we won't make mistakes. That's not to say, we won't mess it up sometimes, but really taking the next step to say, not just about what is allyship and how can I be a better ally, but in what forums, how can I learn so I can actually be an ally, things like that. So I'll stop there.
We've used the term, just one quick point of definition. We've used the term microaggression a couple of times, and I just want to make sure everyone knows that, excuse me, the definition, microaggressions are forms of everyday discrimination that are often rooted in bias. Whether intentional or unintentional, they signal disrespect and are more often directed at those with less power. So when we talk about these microaggressions, that is someone saying, as Ade just mentioned, to a Black person who's speaking in a meeting, oh, you were so articulate, or asking about someone's hair, or in a classroom where it's only one Black student and they're having a conversation about something that may be Black in culture or African in culture, and asking that student to speak up when they had no intention to do so. Sometimes that can be considered a microaggression. Amanda, you were going to say something?
I just wanted to ask a question, and I guess maybe generally it's directed at people or white people. How do you make friends, period? I just want to know, ask them, why don't they just ask themselves, how do you make friends generally? What do you do to be friendly with someone? And my question is, what's stopping you from doing those same things to be friendly with Black folks? And those are questions that they would have to ask themselves. I cannot answer that because I know how I make friends. I run my mouth and I try to see what they like or what they don't like. And I ask them out to eat. I'll pay for lunch. I'll do this. So my question is, how do white people make friends? I just want to know, we're all asking about what can I do? How can I do it? This, that, or what have you. Are we so different from people? That is, I'm talking about Black people. Are we so different that none of them wants to make friends, or they can't use the same tactics or whatever they do to make friends with people of their own race? So that's my question. And I'm thinking that maybe we should have a panel and ask them. Maybe we should do things so they can start looking at themselves, asking themselves why, instead of going to psychiatrists and what have you. Actually talk to yourself and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why can't I be friends with that person? Why do I have to know how they comb their hair? Yeah, I might want to know how they comb their hair, but I'm going to be a friend with them before I ask that personal questions about how they comb their hair. So I'm just, and that's my thing, period. Why can't you just be friendly? Why can't you use the same tactics? Why don't you speak up? If somebody referred to you out of your title, you would probably say something to them. Okay, why can't you just say something to someone else that you just called that particular person out of their title? Are you afraid that you will be thought of differently if you spoke up? And if so, you need to ask yourself, why are you feeling that way? What do you have to lose? So I guess I'm just one that I want people to look at themselves, identify why they do what they do, and how do they do it, or why can't I be this particular way? Talk to yourself. Try to find those things out instead of always asking somebody else, why am I the way I am? You need to talk to yourself sometime.
Well, alrighty then. Jazmyne?
I think I would just add a few points as far as how we push the needle forward. So one, don't go at it alone. So I think we talked about it earlier. with like the BLM movements and how there's multiple people doing things. So whatever your field is, your sector, your major, your cohort, whatever it is, don't go at it alone. Like figure out who are your allies on campus and your community, globally, etc., and go at it that way. And so I found myself being able to like advocate or my advocacy going further within my position now when I'm looping in our African American Studies Department, our Center for African Studies, our Gender and Women's Studies Department, right? I would also say that pushing the conversations outside of the individual and looking at systemic barriers to equity and inclusion is another way that we do it. So identify within your circles, like who holds the power, how do I reclaim that power to be able to push the needle forward. And then lastly, or two more things, kidding. So one is that solidarity is super important. And so today we saw the DACA ruling that overruled Trump's ban, right? And so for us as Black folks, right, one example is that it's standing in solidarity with undocumented folks, and also realizing that certain issues that are characterized as like someone else's problem, that's also a Black issue, right? Like there's whole organizations like UndocuBlack. So for us to understand that, like, for us all to be free and for liberation to be a true thing, that like solidarity has to be a part of that. And then this is my true last point, is that more than one conversation can happen at a time, right? And so right now I'm reading Hood Feminism by Nikki Kendall, and so I would definitely suggest it. But in her book, she talks about the fact that we can have conversations about racism at the same time as we have conversations about gender equity and sexism and things like that. And that even when we're talking about those things, if we're talking about racism, there's still room to say like, okay, we support, or when we're talking about sexism, we can say, in the intersections of that, we can still say like, okay, like we support Black men within this conversation and have those conversations with them around like, this is how you are upholding the patriarchy, right? So it's rooms to have conversations at many levels, and I think they all have to take place at the same time, and not in a hierarchical way of like, first we're gonna tackle this, then this. Like it's the intersectionality piece and really having all the hard conversations, so.
Very good points. We are right at 10 minutes left in the time, so I'm gonna go around. I'm gonna start with Alani because I feel like we've been neglected over there. I keep saying over there because you're at the bottom of my screen. So Alani, just kind of give us your broad overview, last few comments as we close out this session.
I think it's necessary for all of us, like as we're going forward with all of the movement work, to first check our biases, because I think that nothing can be accomplished if we don't do that, and that we need to be intentional about being open-minded and also accepting other people's perspectives, because we consistently say, oh, but I didn't perceive it in that way, or but not everyone is like this. I think it diminishes what can be done and what should be done.
Lois?
I guess I would like to offer a visionary challenge. And that is, I know that upon graduation, one of the first things that we do is to start interviewing for companies. That's how we have been trained to do. But I'd like for you to consider starting your own businesses. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you starting your business and working a job outside as well, having something to back up. The good part of that is, and especially if you have an MBA, you see all sides of how the company runs, and you see it better if you're working inside a company and you're in a particular department and you see something being done, you can apply it to your business. I mean, do the transferable thing. So I'm just saying, consider that. The other thing is, for those of you who have not had a job yet and you're getting ready to look for a job, one of the most important books that I've read was What Color is Your Parachute? I don't know if that's something that you know, but back in the 70s, that reshaped my whole thinking about because I was a music major. I did not have finance or accounting or any of those things. However, I did have transferable skills that allowed me to work inside of a corporation. And that's what I did. I used the ideas that came out of that book, the plans and everything. It's a good guide for when you're looking for a job. You don't have to take every job that's offered to you. Take the one that you are going to enjoy working.
Thank you for that. Monica?
Okay, I just want to say, when we were talking about allies and what we could do to keep the conversation going, I'll just say, like how I tell students, no question is a dumb question. If you're my friend, if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask me, because I don't know everything about white people. I mean, like, I thought all white people wash their hair every single day. I found out that isn't true, you know? And so if you have a question, then ask me, and I will try, I'll try not to make you feel like, oh, you know, she is mad, I don't want to ask her anymore, because I want to keep those conversations going. And I want you to, and I want us to continue to have those conversations. And so, I mean, don't be afraid to ask, but I guess, but on the other hand, do be careful with the words you choose, okay? And, you know, don't just, well, ask a dumb question, I guess, even though it really isn't dumb. I know, right? I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I think that sometimes white people are afraid to even ask a question or start that conversation, because they think that we may be offended or get mad, and then so the conversation is never takes place.
Right. I think I agree with you on that, Monica, and I think the conversation gets shut down before it even starts, right? Because they may be afraid, and sometimes it starts with, I don't want to offend you, bud, and already we're on our heels, right? So instead of saying that, just say, I'm curious, can you help me understand? I know I did that with an Orthodox Jewish person that I worked with for the first time. I didn't know any of their religious beliefs and how they went about their day. And I just said to him, I'm curious, can you help me understand why you put your food in a separate refrigerator? Why you have the cords? And he sat and talked to me, and it was a great, very informative for me and helping me to understand another religion. So I appreciated that. And so I think if you just come from it from a space of curiosity and wanting to understand and know, I think that helps to create a better space for the conversation as well.
Yes.
Day, any last comments from you?
Sure. I'll say three things, hopefully very briefly. The first is directly relating to the conversation that is being had right now, which is about conversation. Like I said, I introduced myself by saying I've been having a hard time these last 3 weeks, and I mean it. Like, I can cry. I cried during this conversation. I tried to hide it, but I cried during this conversation today. It's been a hard 3 weeks, and I do feel very strong. I'm open to conversation. I welcome it. I've had many conversations with people of all races, but I expect people that are close to me to not pretend like there's not work that's been done. Black women, Black people have been writing about their experiences since the beginning of time. Don't come to me and pretend that like you don't even know where to start, because there's nothing out there. I had a conversation with my sister and brother where I said, people know where to start. It's called Google. I don't expect you not to talk to me, but I also expect you to be informing yourself at the same time, because I am too. I'm not the expert on all Black issues. I'm not the expert on Black history. Right. I'm not the expert on allyship, right? So that too. Other two things will be very quick. Find your thing. I'm not somebody who can sustain going to protests every weekend for the rest of my life. I should go. I should be energized by that energy. But I also am a policy person, and so my lane is really understanding how redlining works, really understanding how banks discriminate, really understanding these things that are my intellectual space that I love, but not neglecting the rest of it, and keeping the people who want to burn the system down in my friend group too, right? Even as I try to work through the system. And then the last thing that I'll say is celebrate progress, even as we critique and keep pushing. I talked to Rosetta and everybody a couple of days ago, and I said, I'm tired, I'm angry, not here for constructive conversation right now. But there have been great successes. Even today, I got an email from another former university of mine that they're revolutionizing their curriculum, and that's a win, right? That's a win. So celebrate wins even as we critique is the last thing I'd say.
I really appreciate all of you for, one, taking the time out of your busy schedules, because I know all of you are busy in your own right, but to be so vulnerable to share these conversations. And I think it is important. And many of our attendees do as well. I want to end with a few of the comments here. And I apologize to those who are commenting. It's coming in pretty quickly, so I may miss some of the comments here. But I'll start with Kalen Gray. He says, thank you all for being a part of this and providing candid commentary on your life and professional experiences. Excuse me. He says, this was a great example of what we all need to practice doing, and that is listening to Black women. Special thanks to Amanda Toney-Logan, as she is a direct reason I was able to be and stay at IWU. He was a recipient of one of her scholarships. So yes, thank you, Kaylin, for that. Priyanka Sharma says, thank you so much for sharing your time, insights, and candid thoughts with us. I continue to remain amazed of our alumni, and you all make me proud to be in your company. Jewel Walton says, love that all day. Andy Chris, thank you all. We love you. I love you. Sarah Breeden, thank you, everyone. Derek Tillman Kelly, who started our conversations last week, he says, y'all are the reminder of just how dope Black women are.
We all that.
I agree. It's just so lovely to have this conversation and see all of you and share in this with you. And I, again, appreciate that all of you were so immediate to say yes to this. And I hope that we will continue to have these discussions. They are important for our community. It has been extremely enlightening for us to have these varying perspectives, experiences, and knowledge for Black women to possess. And I want to end with this, and I didn't begin with it purposely, but I want to end with the definition of invisible. It is not visible, not perceptible by the eye, an invisible gas, withdrawn from us or out of sight, hidden, an invisible seen, not perceptible or discernible by the mind, invisible differences, not ordinarily found in financial statements or reflected in statistics or a listing. So in this definition, and in most cases, being invisible is not good. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for the individual, and it's certainly not good for an organization. And it's time we start to see Black women and the value they bring in plain sight or through a better and brighter lens. Ladies, again, thank you for sharing your stories and experiences. To everyone in the room who attended, I appreciate you and your comments. I hope you will continue to join our conversations. The next one we will have will be a Titan Talk that will feature David Wilkins Sr., class of 74, and his son Nate, class of 17, who is also, well, as you know, is the son of our panelist today, Lois. They will have an intergenerational conversation about being Black men in America. And this talk will be moderated by Dr. Brandon Common, Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs. And I'm really looking forward to that discussion as well. I think it will enlighten us even further. Again, thanks to all of you who joined us today for this episode of the Titan Talks webinar series. You will be receiving a survey, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback as we continue to develop content that is relevant, that is topical, and that is informative. Thanks again, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosetta.
Bye-bye.
Bye.